Hi, welcome. I'm Dr. Maya Shetreat, and I'm going to talk to you today about Venus turning direct. So after a 40-day, 40-night trial, the goddess of love and beauty stationed direct and is now starting to actually traverse directly and is going to remain direct for 18 months, all the way through December 19th of 2021. So we are about to have 18 months of Venus going direct. Now, probably a lot of us have been going through since April when this retrograde started. We've been feeling confused, emotional, divided, feeling like we've been going in a lot of different directions, feeling maybe a little lazy. And this is bringing some relief, some clarity to mind as we are working with Venus in this mutable, flexible energy of Gemini. When Venus goes direct, we have this opportunity to shed our old baggage, to build faith in our old potential, and to connect with people, and to have, to really become the cosmic peacemaker as Venus is turning direct. So I want to start by just saying a few words about retrogrades in general. And this I learned in ancient astrology and classical astrology, that the sun moves in this primary motion in the sky, and it goes from east to west, rises in the east, sets in the west. And the planets move in the opposite direction. They're in daily motion going from west to east. So they are really moving against the current, this powerful primary motion of the sun. The planets move in secondary motion, in the opposite direction. And each planet has its own will, its own time frame, its own means and ways and ends. Each planet is doing its thing. And then when the planet goes into retrograde, it falls into the primary motion, sort of this larger force. And the planet in some way loses its full agency because this larger force of the universe is taking over. And that's kind of, in a way, how we operate, right? Where we feel like we're in control and we're doing our thing, setting goals, meeting our goals, and suddenly something big happens. And it feels now, rather than like we are in control, like things are happening to us. And it reveals that we're not totally in control, that there are bigger forces. And usually during a retrograde, it means frustrations, it means setbacks, it means that things might feel as though in some way they're falling apart or breaking down. And the goal of these retrogrades is to show us that we need to do things differently. We need to rebuild in a different way. So when Venus was in retrograde, it could have something to do with the topics that Venus represents: love, relationships, beauty, being pleasant, feeling pleasant or charming, sex or sexuality, love and romance, art, fashion, cosmetics, agreements with other people, finances. And sometimes the changes that we might try to make, we feel this need during the retrograde to make these changes. Sometimes they're going to feel more superficial, the things we're going to decide to do. Classically, that could be getting the dramatic haircut, or an expensive, outlandish neon animal print jacket that you would really probably never wear any other time. And that's a way you're trying to express the need to change something. And that can be fine, but you don't want that to allow you to bypass the deeper lessons, because you're feeling this on a deep level. So you don't want to only go for the superficial change. Now, basically, what's happening is that there's a process. It's a story that's playing out. And rather than doing what you would ordinarily do in the usual plot, you're being asked to pay attention to the details, to notice the setbacks, to be mindful, to learn some lessons. And then as the planet goes direct, you put them into action. Your lessons are learned, hopefully, and you move forward a little different, hopefully wiser. So reflect on what you've been through from April until now. What have you learned during the last 40 days? I'd love to hear what kind of things you've been coming up against over the past few months and where you are with it now going forward. Now, Venus has been in Gemini, and so you may have been experiencing a lot of these challenges around ideology, especially in how you communicate through technology, media, social media, writing, conversation, thinking, and ideas. And I would say a big theme of this Venus retrograde that we came out of was that there's been a lot of shadow coming up in relationships and how we communicate with each other and how we relate to each other. And that could really be on the topic of COVID or of racism and police brutality, all these things that have been coming to the forefront. And just when I was thinking we could not possibly be more polarized in how we're all communicating, I watched everyone become more polarized. I have never seen people refer to other people, especially friends and people in their communities, as idiots as much as I have over the past few months during this retrograde. And that's Venus in retrograde in Gemini. Now, it's not that any of these issues are new per se, or that they haven't been in your consciousness all along. It's just the things that come up during a retrograde, you're not going to be able to look away so easily as you might have been able to do in the past. So one area where I saw a really profound reassessment was in our interactions with each other, as I said, partners, business associates, communities, networks, businesses, just everyone started really reassessing, who am I associating with? Who are they really? Are they people I really resonate with? Are they people I really want to relate to? There was a period, I think, for many people of asking ourselves who we want to be in a deeper way, really thinking about who and how we want to be in the world. And this is not just about whether the people that you've been in relationship are pleasing to you, but also whether the way you've been pleasing other people has been serving you. Because we put a lot of work into how do we please others. And sometimes during a Venus retrograde, you're going to reassess if that is really serving you, if the way that you've been putting yourself out there and the kind of compromises you've been making, the work you've been putting in, the effort is really what you want. So, for example, I've been seeing a lot of people speaking out more boldly now on issues that matter to them than they may ever have before. Even though it may be alienating people in their lives, they feel driven to speak bravely on the things that matter to them. And of course, that's the retrograde being in Gemini. It's affecting how you communicate. It's affecting whether you want to be pleasing, because during a Venus retrograde in Gemini, your communication may be more fraught. It may be less pleasant, less pleasing, less charming. And I think all of us have been feeling that with one another. Another area that I think a lot of people have been doing their deep dive as to how they want to reassess is appearance. So one thing about this Venus retrograde is that we've really had to see ourselves as we really are, because the beauty salons are closed, the gyms are closed, the waxing place is closed, the nail salons are closed, and suddenly, for many people, we are presenting as we authentically are, for real, without a lot of the different things that we normally do to make ourselves look different. So, for example, people were going gray or brown or black or whatever hair color they might naturally have. They weren't waxing, so people were getting hairier, especially women who, normally are pretending that they're hairless. And it's because there's this expectation, this societal expectation, that we're not supposed to look older, that we're not supposed to have hair on our bodies in certain places. Here we are looking as we are, looking authentic, and finding out maybe that we're beautiful as we are, that turning gray could be beautiful, that aging can be beautiful, that our bodies are beautiful even if they have hair in places that we normally don't want people to know we have. And it reminds me of, I think it was the first Batman movie when, you know, the Joker in some way contaminated all the toiletries, and there were the newscasters going on and their hair was all, you know, a mess, and they weren't wearing any makeup and they looked really sallow, and it was, you know, they were afraid to use the toiletries. But in this case, you know, we were being forced, but really given an opportunity to think about how we want to look, how we want to serve and be pleasing to the patriarchy. And that goes for men and for women, the kind of expectations that we have. Another area where we really started reassessing fashion or changing fashion was mask fashion. So suddenly people really, really were wearing masks, and not just wearing the bandana, but actually starting to buy fabrics and make masks of different fabrics that really reflect how they wanted to present. If they're going to have something on their face, they wanted it to be, you know, skull, you know, the skull and crossbones, or they wanted it to be pink kittens, or whatever it was. So that was another area where how we looked really made, went under some transition, and we changed things. And again, with the topic of race coming to the forefront, not that it hasn't been at the forefront, but with protests and demonstrations and even riots, again, Venus in retrograde, this sort of much more aggressive, less pleasing, less pleasant way of bringing a message forward, right? None of this is new. It's hundreds of years old, but still as pressing as ever. But the image around this suddenly became important. We started saying, well, you know, who do we want to be in this conversation? Are we, and I think this went for everybody. Am I going to speak out? Am I going to be am I going to really take this on? Am I going to put myself out there? Or am I going to still be quiet about this? Am I going to still just, you know, whatever feelings, whatever I want in terms of civil rights, in terms of equity, in terms of justice, you know, how am I going to present? And of course, image became very important, where everyone suddenly wanted to appear concerned to their audience or their customers or their communities or their friends, whether it was influencers or big brands, whether it was on social media or in advertising. Suddenly, you know, everyone from individuals to companies were thinking, how are we being seen and perceived on this? Are we on the right side of the prevailing public opinion? Will we be pleasing? And it was really interesting to see who was being performative, who was really trying to step into a more authentic way of standing up for civil rights. So that really became a profound issue. And a lot of people, I think, also were taking stock of who they want to be, who each of us wants to be in our relationships, with a deeper sense of who we're associating with and what companies and what influencers we want to support and what communities we want to be a part of, right? In this process of taking stock of who we are, how we are in the world. Now, sexuality, I think, was another place that we really were hearing it kind of came to the forefront over this period, because we were hearing from, I think it was the British government that was asking their citizens to limit their sexual activity to whoever was in their pod, or even to wear masks with their partners during sex. I don't know if you looked at my last video, but I talked about the Saturn Moon opposition. That is definitely a part of this idea of wearing masks during sex, but also it has to do with Venus in retrograde. And of course, also, it's no mistake that all of this happened during Pride Month, where we were talking about sexuality, we were talking about gender identity, we were putting the spotlight on the fact that Pride and the whole movement of Pride was actually started by Black trans women. And now that Venus is moving direct, the collective is really having conversations about how to be more inclusive, how we can be more intersectional, discriminating in how, we have been discriminating and how we can stop discriminating on the basis of how pleasing we are to the white patriarchy. And that goes again for women and men, our age, race, gender, sexuality, sexual identity, gender identity, all of these things. We even had this whole kerfuffle, I don't know if that's really, is that a word? With J.K. Rowling, who used social media and Twitter to put out these ideas about gender identity and, whether it's real, and it caused a whole, a whole conversation again, and a lot of changes in terms of what authors were publishing with her publishing house, people stepping away, really people again saying, what is authentic for me? And who do I want to be associated with? What is pleasing to me? And who do I want to please? So that takes us into the last topic I want to mention, which is pleasure. And of course, Venus represents pleasure. And I think in this Venus retrograde, what people have started to really entertain and appreciate is what gives us pleasure. We are relearning how to interact with each other. The simplest of things, the hug, the handshake, being with a friend, being in a restaurant, eating someone's food, sharing food with someone that you like or love, a walk in the park together. These are all these small pleasures that maybe we never fully appreciated. And now suddenly, maybe we see someone we know and we want to give this hug, and maybe you're uncomfortable giving the hug. Maybe they're uncomfortable giving the hug, but suddenly everyone's asking that question. How do we interact in these moments of pleasure? And where are we getting pleasure? So I think with this idea, moving forward, as Venus is really now has been stationed direct, is now moving direct, I think it's really important, okay, because we know that whatever's been going on is not quite over yet. I think we all have that sense that we're not totally through the woods. And I'll be doing a video later today on Mars entering Aries, which is a potentially challenging transit that we are going to have through the end of the year. So there's a lot still to navigate, but what we need to learn, I think, and why we had this Venus retrograde when we did, is that we need to remember we must connect to what gives us pleasure. Even within the context of the parameters of our lives right now, if we have masks or social distancing or whatever parameters we may have, to still not let us pass up on opportunities for connection in the ways that we can have that, in the things that give us pleasure, that give us joy, that make us feel beautiful, whether inside or out. For me, it's been, okay, like I'm not gonna be able to go a whole year without seeing friends in real life. So every once in a while, a friend will come over and we'll hang out. We put blankets down in my yard, in my garden, and we're outside in the sun with some distance, but we're still getting to enjoy each other and see each other's faces and, just have that connection. There's really no getting around what we have to face karmically. It's how we navigate it, right? We have the lessons that we need to learn, the growth we have to experience. But I think a big cosmic lesson right now is how do we find joy, rest, pleasure, even in the most difficult moments or periods. That is a real spiritual practice of the deepest kind. That doesn't mean avoiding the hard things. It means even acknowledging and engaging in the hard things, even working to make things better in society, in the world, knowing that we always must find joy, rest, pleasure in the context of that. So let me know in the comments below how you're manifesting joy in your life right now, or how you plan to, now that we're moving out of this retrograde and Venus will be direct for the next 18 months. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more wisdom on the earth, health, activism, and the cosmos. Have a great day.